Today's episode is brought to you by Situational Awareness Matters Simulation Software, SAMSIM. SAMSIM is designed to help give your officers and trainees a realistic picture of potential situations to have them practice what they would do or say. It provides an easy way to rapidly create what-if situations in your first do area using photographs of buildings in your town. Teach recognition prime decision-making, smoke reading, and situational awareness. Develop scenarios in the field or at your office to use virtually anywhere. Share scenarios among colleagues and friends. Have trainees come up with their own scenarios to practice. Apply meaningful views of your district for tabletop exercises and hands-on promotional exams, and take and share snapshots of training scenarios to enhance after-action reports and other presentations. If you're interested in the software, you can go to samatters.com and click on the SAMSIM box on the right side of the homepage. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. On this episode, I interview retired Okaloosa County Sheriff's Investigator Steven Hough. Steven was shot 3 times by a suspect and then returned fire, mortally wounding the assailant. In this gripping interview, Investigator Hough shares how his training paid off under the stress of gunfire, how he experienced the fog of war, and he explains in detail what that means, how he used combat breathing techniques to keep himself calm, and why it is so important to get yourself mentally and physically prepared for the fight. An Okaloosa County Sheriff's Investigator shot 3 times while working to take a violent fugitive into custody received the Medal of Valor from the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. His fellow OCSO officers involved in the incident were also recognized for their bravery. Investigator Steven Hough was working outside the suspect's Milton home on December 9, 2011, as part of a U.S. Marshal Service perimeter team. There was very little area to provide cover from the suspect, Christopher Lewis, and he abruptly came out of the house, guns in each hand, and began firing at the officers. Investigator Hough returned fire, but was shot once in the face and 2 times in the leg. Lewis did not stop firing until his ammunition was gone. Lewis received multiple gunshot wounds and eventually proved fatal. Investigator Hough put himself at personal risk to ensure Lewis did not escape, knowing the threat that he posed to others. For that act of bravery, Investigator Hough received the Medal of Valor. And now he joins us today on SA Matters Radio to share his close call survivor story. Mr. Hough, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you. And please feel free to call me Steve. Mr. Hough makes me sound old.
Okay, Steve, I'll do that. So tell us what happened.
All right. Well, as you stated earlier, it was December 9th, 2011. It was a Friday. The gentleman we were hunting, me personally, I prefer not to mention his name just because it's pretty much not important anymore. But we'd actually, the hunt for him, or our information leading us to try to apprehend him, started the day before. And it had started with us going to his house and numerous other houses in Milton, Florida, trying to apprehend him. He had, I believe, 3 to 4 different warrants. One of them was a weapons warrant, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, Also possession of ammunition by a convicted felon, and then I believe it was a kidnapping warrant, if I'm not mistaken, and a failure to pay child support. So the Marshal Service, obviously, with the charges in his history, their violent fugitive task force was activated. Myself and other members of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office were members of that violent fugitive task force. So we were called out to attempt to apprehend him. And what happened the day before basically is he would turn his cell phone on and then turn his cell phone off as he would go to different locations. And we were just behind him, one house at a time, pretty much just kind of leapfrogging to house. And we were just having no luck. Well, that night, the phone went dead, so we pretty much called it. They didn't expect anything to go on for Friday. So we all said, we're all buddies anyways, from Okaloosa County to Santa Rosa County. We're kind of a tight-knit group. And we pretty much told everybody have a good weekend and left it at that. Well, 6 o'clock the next morning, we get a phone call that his phone was on. So I contacted my partner, Jeff McGill, and I said, hey, the phone's back on. They want us back en route. By the time we make it back up to Milton, they have already made entry into another house, which just so happened to be his brother's house. Now, once they did that, his brother was pretty much letting us know, hey, he doesn't want to go back to jail. He says he's going to kill somebody, which fit pretty much with the information that we had from previous contacts and informants telling us, hey, he's actually planning to execute a cop if he gets pulled over in a car or stopped somewhere. He's planning on killing somebody. So we were able to track his location and figure out where he was at, what house he was in. He was actually in a friend's house of his. So we set up perimeter, and we were waiting for we were pretty much waiting for SWAT team to get there to go ahead and make entry. We held that perimeter for a good, 2 to 3 hours at least. And when we
did he know you were out there?
Oh yeah, he knew we were out there.
Okay.
We would hear different sounds in the house. At one point we thought we heard almost like the racking of a slide. Of course we couldn't be sure, but he knew we were in there the entire time. Unbeknownst to us, the entire time he was in there and we were outside, he was texting his friend saying, hey, I love you. He was basically getting ready to do what he was going to do. We had set up if you will, a containment perimeter, which we had guys on all four corners of the house. And we tried to make entry into the garage. Well, the garage door stuck about a quarter of the way up and it wouldn't go back down. So as luck would have it for me, I was on that corner with another friend of mine, Todd Watkins, and he's a 20-year veteran of the sheriff's office as well, and we're good friends. So we get off the corner, and I pull my vehicle up to the end of the driveway to where we can see the front of the house and the front door, but we're not wide open in the front. I mean, he would have to come out the door and look for us to see us. So we hid we took up a position behind the engine block. Todd had a shield. I had my rifle with me. And we pretty much made a plan. As you know, I mean, tactics is no more than a game of chess. You've got to, for every one movement, there's two other movements that can be made. So we were adjusting accordingly. Everybody was adjusting accordingly. We had vehicles moving in and out. We were pretty much getting hunkered in for the long stay. And we were standing out front, and I told Todd, I said, hey, if anything happens, you come up with your shield. I'm going to come over your right shoulder, so you have the engine block as part of cover, and then I'll be taking cover behind you behind the shield. And we thought that was a really great idea. And what we did, we wound up, after making our plans, we actually were still on a perimeter for a good another 45 minutes. It was so long that, they took pictures of a business card of mine that was laying on the ground after everything had occurred. And the importance of the business card was I put it on the roof of my car and set my rifle on it. because the rifle was getting so heavy, and I didn't want to not train my rifle on the front door, so I set the rifle down on the business card so I wouldn't scratch up my car, which would later, prove to be kind of a funny story because the car got shot like 5 times. So exactly. So I was kind of worried about a scratch, but the car got shot all the heck and back. So as we're holding this perimeter, the suspect comes out the door. And what he does is he comes out the front and he makes a big a big circular motion to go back into the house. So obviously what he was doing was he was doing a little surveillance. I mean, he was trying to figure out where our perimeter units were. So as soon as he came out the house, we started yelling, sheriff's office, let me see your hands, let me see your hands. And he goes back in the house. And this is where
Did
everything...
he have a weapon?
No, not at that point. We did not see a weapon. We just saw his hands. We just saw him. It was probably no more than a second or two. He came out, turned right back around and went back in. He was definitely looking to see where his angle of attack was going to be. Later, and what we found out was when he came back outside, he basically went back in the house and drew his weapons. He had cross-draw holsters on. So when he had those cross-draw holsters, what he did was he actually drew the weapons and kicked the door with his foot. And this is all a summation of pretty much this is what we surmise he did, because there's no way for him to open the door. And he started shooting so quickly, he actually started shooting through the door itself before the door got open, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
He reached down with that foot, threw that door open, and before the door was open, he was laying down rounds. So he makes a beeline. He comes straight for my vehicle, straight for it. And he's just, at this point, he's just spraying and praying.
How far are you away?
Oh, my goodness. We are probably 20 yards, 15 yards.
Okay.
Not far. Okay. Not far at all. So he's coming across, if you can picture the front of a house, he's coming across the front yard, and he's coming through the driveway. So he is advancing so quickly on us. The initial reaction for both Todd and I it was very quick, and it was very much, there was no thought in it. It was pure reaction, pure training and reaction. The first thing that went through my head was, this isn't fair, he's got 2 guns. And then the next thing I remember is laying on the trigger. And that was a split second. There was no pause. He got off, I think, 2 to 3 shots, and then we started just unloading. And he kept advancing. He actually advanced at almost a 45-degree angle from the front door to our vehicle, coming across the front yard. Well, he was advancing so quickly. The U.S. Marshal in charge at the time, he thought he was going to overtake our position. So he actually came around the back of his vehicle, which was parked about halfway up the driveway in the adjoining house to the left-hand side of the house. So he was about halfway up the drive, off to the left of the house. So he came around the backside of his vehicle and immediately started engaging the guy. And so now we've got at least 3 of us engaging him. And the guys on the other side, they pretty much couldn't engage him because there was too much fire going on. They didn't want to get caught up in a crossfire situation. So my partner, Todd, he yells at me. He goes, "Move." Well, I didn't hear him the first time. Obviously, the fog of war. I mean, at this point, my vision had narrowed pretty much. I still remember the sounds. They weren't muffled. It sounded pretty much like I would have expected it to sound, but I could tell that the vision was starting to narrow in on him. So he yells at me again to move, "Steve, move." And it was at that time, the second time, I got hit in the face. Now, sometime in the exchange of fire, before I went down, between him coming out of the house and me going down, I hit him. I actually was the only one with a rifle on the front of the house that day. And at that point in time, we had other gentlemen there, but they had to leave. But I was the only one there, and it was pretty much a dead center shot, right? I mean, center mass. It couldn't have been a better shot if I tried, which I was trying, I guess. But I went down. And when I went down, it took me a second. As you're aware, as you well know, I mean, I've read a lot of your stuff on the website and going through your Twitter posts and stuff. It really took me a second to as you would say, orient myself to go, what just happened? Because it felt like somebody just punched me in the face.
Mm-hmm.
Hard. Well, as soon as I started seeing the blood, then I knew I was shot. So I knew at that point I was pretty much combat ineffective. I mean, I got a hole in my face. I don't know how bad it is. So I start going for cover. About the time I start going for cover, all the gunfire stops because the bad guy, the suspect, is down. So I make it to cover, and my buddy Todd comes running around, and another buddy of mine from Santa Rosa County comes running around. And the guy from Santa Rosa County, he stuffs a shirt, takes his shirt off and puts it in my face. I'm still able to communicate. I'm well aware of what is going on in my surroundings. The guys would later say that I was almost eerily calm about what was happening. But the SWAT team they were in the process of getting ready to hit the house. Well, they came running up with the gunfire, and the next thing we start hearing is he's moving, and they start yelling and giving commands. So we're like, Todd gets on top of me. He's like, Steve, we got to go now. So I was like, let's move. So they picked me up, and we pretty much ran probably, I want to say 50 yards. It may have been a little bit longer than that, to almost like a command center where the SWAT guys were getting ready to do their thing. So they put me back there. The decision was made pretty quickly for them to load me up in a vehicle and take me to the hospital. The hospital was only a couple of minutes away. The entire time, as I like to say in the debriefings that I do and stuff like that, the biggest thing, the one thing that I remember doing the most, or the one thing that comes to mind, is the combat breathing. Immediately after the shooting, and when I'm sitting there by myself for those seconds before anybody got to me, I can remember slowing my breathing down and starting to control that. So I think that kind of helped out with me being able to understand what was going on, as well as, I remember a lot of everything that went on that day. So they loaded me up in the vehicle and took me to the hospital. Once we were at the hospital, at this point, everybody knew I was shot in the face. Nobody knew I was shot in the legs. I didn't even know I was shot in the legs. I didn't feel it. I had no inkling that there was anything going on. And it wasn't until they did their the cursory search that they do looking for other wounds that they found the other 4 holes, which were the 2 shots that were through and through. At that point, I started to get really scared. I wasn't so much scared when I was obviously scared, but not so much in the way that I could still communicate. I could still talk. I could still see everything. My dexterity had actually came back in my hands. I was able to unclip my rifle. So I was feeling pretty confident as far as, even though I didn't know the amount or the extent of the damage to the face, I was pretty confident at that point. I was like, okay, we're at the hospital. I'm going to be good. But then when they said, well, we got 4 more bullet holes in you, that's when I was like, hey, you need to tell my wife I love her, because that's when it really hit me. It's like, oh, this may not be good. I may not be as good as I think I am. So the doctors come in. Actually, the nurses come in and they start talking with me a bit. And the more nurses come in, the more they keep asking me, hey, what happened to you? So I have to tell them, and, hey, I got shot in the face. Hey, I got shot in the face. And then finally the doctor comes in and says, hey, I'm, your trauma doc. Why don't you tell me what happened? Well, I got really mad at that point because so many people had asked me what had happened. I was pretty much thinking they weren't talking to each other. I mean, I didn't realize what they were doing until afterwards. So I started my conversation with him with a biblical reference, and then threw in some cuss words on top of that. And he started laughing. Well, everybody else started laughing, and that kind of made me feel better, because you can relate to this. You have seen that look that people give people when they know things are bad, and
Right.
and that you may not survive. And that is a look that I will never forget. And when I talk about it and when I see it, it makes me angry. 3 years later, it still makes me very angry to see that look. But when I did that, that kind of broke that look, and everybody quit looking at me like that. So I felt better. From there, it was getting loaded on a chopper to the Sacred Heart Trauma Center, and 2 days later, I wake up looking at a cross and my brother and my wife, and I go, I made it. And that was pretty much it for that entire incident. The bad guy, he wound up dying like 3 days after that from his wounds, his internal wounds. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell as far as that part of the story.
Were any of the other officers injured?
There was Todd actually took a round in the shield. He said during the firefight he felt like something hit his foot like a hammer. So obviously there was a ricochet or something that hit his foot. There was no breaking of the skin. It didn't break any bones or anything like that. But he did take at least one round that we saw that hit the shield and bounced off. But other than that, he was hit actually 3 times in the volley of fire. And I'm sure some of your other listeners who have been in gun battles or firefights are familiar with this. I mean, there were 60 rounds exchanged, and he was hit 3 times. So between him shooting and us shooting, 60 rounds in about 10 seconds, and he only got hit 3 times, and then I took 3. And all 3 of mine looked like they were, even the one to the face, they said probably was a ricochet off the rifle. So
why do you think that it was that there were so many rounds? I mean, you guys are behind cover, but this guy's, I'm assuming he's like square out in the open, but I know he's not standing still. But it seems like a lot of rounds to be exchanged, and I'm kind of hearkening back to something that I had read in Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's book about being under fire and the accuracy and stuff. Absolutely. Has any thought been given to how so many rounds could be shot at this guy, but only 3 of them hit him? And I'm not taking a shot at the officer's skill. I'm just curious as to how in the movies they always get there's always 100 shots exchanged and nobody ever gets hit in
Right.
the movies, but that's movie life. And I've always thought, well, in real life, you guys bear down on somebody and it's usually one pop and they're done.
Right. There was a lot of talk about that. As far as for me, I know I actually went back to the scene when I got out of the hospital and found the holes in the house, and I had started tracking him high. I mean, you could see where I was shooting across the front of the house, just above him, instead of almost like I was trying for a headshot. I don't know. I mean, I would be guessing at that point whether or not what I was doing. I will say this: the other 2 shots that hit him came from officers who were not in the line of fire, that were behind cover. The one guy, great kid from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, he pretty much said that he drew down, he took a breath, so he was able to, not like he would per se do at the range, but he was able to calm himself down before he put the round off. And then once he put his round off, the guy dropped, boom, and he hit the ground. As far as that's me, Todd, I will say this: if you have never experienced shooting a pistol with a while trying to hold a tactical shield, a full-size tactical shield. It is a feat in and among itself at 10 yards, let alone 15 or 20 yards. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he did, I mean, you could see, we went back and looked at his rounds as well, hitting, and he was peppering all around him. He wasn't on target, but I mean, holding up a shield and doing that for a guy that does not train consistently or all the time like your SWAT guys do and stuff. I mean, we've all had shield training, but it wasn't to the extent of you're the shield guy, you train with your shield.
Yeah.
So
that brings up a question. Do you guys, other than the SWAT officers, do folks that are in positions like you or Todd ever at the range practice holding a shield and shooting? Or would that unto itself have been something that Todd either had never done or had done very infrequently?
It would be more infrequently. And I say that as a whole. You know as well as I do, us law enforcement officers who get our training, the majority of the training, and we actually receive more training than most, but the majority of the training is, at least from the area that we're at, is you go to the range every 6 months, you shoot at paper targets, and you're done. Mm-hmm. You know, they're really trying to incorporate a little bit more tactical training in that, which obviously is needed. But even training, you say once a month, 1 8-hour day out of the month with a shield, that's not enough. You know, it really needs to be more frequent. And again, if you think about the entire incident, the way it went down, I mean, you can't hardly make a movie like that. I mean, it's just unreal. Usually your guys with the shield are, you know, walking through the front door, engaging in a close quarter battle. I mean, you're talking within 5 yards best, you know, down a hallway, something like that. To prepare for something where you're taking shield shots at 20 yards probably was not, you know, I would not have ever have thought of that back then. Now, of course, I'd be like, oh yeah, you need to practice at 20 yards with your shield. But I mean, how often is that practiced? And that would be something I'd like to know from maybe some of your listeners, or maybe some of the other SWAT guys or something. How far back do you guys train with your shields and stuff like that? It's just an interesting training point for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll put with your okay, I'll put an email address at the end, and if somebody has some information they can share with you, they can reach out to you directly and share what their experiences are, or how they're training, or maybe how they're not training, that they'd want to learn a little bit more from you about what they should be doing.
Sure, absolutely. I would encourage that, and I would really like that.
Okay, you had earlier in the interview had mentioned, and you said, well, kind of cliche, the fog of war. Well, I don't think that everybody would necessarily know the fog of war as a term, but as you use the term fog of war, and as far as what happened to you, describe in a little more detail what this proverbial fog was that occurred, and you know, what did it feel like, sound like? I mean, what was happening there that allowed you to use that term, the fog of war?
I gotcha. And to do that, the best way to do that is, you know, you referenced Dave Grossman, and I've been fortunate enough to read his books as well as others. But when you're in a position where you're in, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a gun battle, a fight of any kind, when you go into that fight or flight sense of mind, and all the things start happening with your body, where all the blood starts coming into your vital organs, and you get the effects of your tunnel vision, you get the effects of your I couldn't see the house. I saw him, but I couldn't see the house. Mm-hmm. And that was, you know, just that shrinking of your vision as the body prepares itself to be for combat. there was, as I said before, the sounds. It sounded very vivid to me. However, the interesting part was, and the guys there even said so, their ears were not ringing afterwards. Normally, if you go to the range and you shoot without putting your hearing protection on, your ears, you go like, ah, and you wind up and your ears start ringing for, several minutes afterwards. Nobody had ringing of the ears. The sounds were to me, they were very lifelike. They were not muffled. I know some folks have reported it didn't sound like they're in previous incidents that I've read online or wherever. I can't exactly quote where I've read them from, but they sound like the shots have been muffled, like maybe the round was a squib round or something like that. Mm-hmm. When in fact it was fine. It was just the body preparing you for your fight. Yeah. There was, just like Todd yelling at me, I didn't hear him the first time. It took me a minute or a second or two to calm down to hear him yelling at me the second time to move. There was no looking at Todd. There was no looking elsewhere. Everything was focused in on him. And if I could have a moment to just speculate, I would think that one of the first shots that I fired was probably the one that hit him, just because everything was just the focus that you have. A lot of times when you shoot somebody or you hear about shooting somebody, your first shot is close to the gun because that's what you see, and that's what you're drawn to, and that's what you aim at. So to hit him dead center with him holding both guns out like that, I would think that's what happened. There is a presence that you don't really think about the other folks that are there. One of the other guys that was on the perimeter, he actually, there was rounds actually coming at him, so he decided to move out of the way because he knew the rounds were coming. However, there was another guy that didn't know, so those two bumped into each other trying to change places because the other guy was like, hey, I'm going to get a better shot if I go around here in front of the car. Well, my buddy just left there because there was rounds coming down range at him. Mm-hmm. So, in that true fog, you don't, you just act on autopilot. A lot of things are slowed down. A lot of things don't, they're not as vivid as if you were sitting here today. Like if we were talking and I could see you on Skype, it wouldn't be nearly as vivid as that. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much about the best way I could describe it. You're there and you're pretty much, it felt like I was acting on autopilot. I was just doing what I was trained to do.
Let's pause for a moment from our interview with Investigator Hough so I can share some information with you about how you can attend a live Situational Awareness Matters tour event, or if you can't attend a live event, how you can sign up for the online academy. If you're interested in attending a live event, you can check out the Situational Awareness Matters tour stop schedule at samatters.com. Click on the Program and Keynotes tab below the header, then click on the Events Schedule tab. If I'm in your area, I hope you'll consider attending a live event. If you're not able to attend a live event, consider signing up for the SA Matters Online Academy. The Academy contains videos and articles that cover the same content as the 3-day live tour event, delivered in 14 modules that you can go through at your own pace from your own computer. The Academy Plus version includes 4 books that are referenced throughout the Academy. The Plus version is a great bargain because the tuition simply covers the costs of the books, making the Academy free. Just click on the link below the header on the SA Matters homepage titled Online Academy. Okay, let's pick up our interview again with Investigator Steven Hough, who was working outside of a suspect's home in Milton, Florida on December 9th, 2011 as part of a U.S. Marshals Service perimeter team. There he was face-to-face with an assailant who shot him 3 times, once in the face and twice in the legs. He was able to return fire and mortally wound the suspect, and he's talking about his close call survival experience. Did things slow down?
I don't remember. I honestly do not remember if they slowed down or not. I can tell you when I hit the ground and started trying to figure out what had happened, that was kind of slow motion. But when I started scrambling for cover, things came back really quick. And then once I got behind the car and actually sat down behind another vehicle for cover, time started kind of picking back up again, and things were real time at that point.
Did you hear all the shots?
I think I did. I think I heard. I can tell you, I heard us shooting, and I remember when the shooting stopped, which was pretty much right about when I was going for cover or when I made it to cover. So I can remember. That's what I mean. I can remember a lot of things that happened that came back rather quickly, where some folks have that blackout, I guess you would call it, where they don't remember getting, either hit by the car or getting in the fight and getting hit, or I pretty much have a good memory of all of that.
Now, you earlier in the interview gave credit to keeping your head about you and knowing what was going on and hearing things and keeping yourself in the moment, using a term that you used, combat breathing. So for those in the audience who may not know what you meant by that, describe what combat breathing is and how you used it to help keep you calm.
I gotcha. I sure will. As everybody, as we understand, and maybe some of the listeners don't understand, when something like this happens, your heart rate will just skyrocket. It will go from maybe 90 beats a minute or whatever your normal resting heart rate is, all the way. It can go all the way up to, who knows, 175, 180 beats a minute.
Absolutely.
And that would be, almost a condition black. And what I mean by condition black, I don't want to keep throwing things out there where I got to go back and explain
throw it
myself,
out and then explain it, because people are learning from you.
I gotcha. Well, when you hit that condition black, and I want to think of the pilot's name that came up with that. Is it Boyd's colors? Do you recall the name of Dr. Gasaway?
Boyd is known for
the OODA loop.
The OODA loop.
There was a pilot that came up with the condition colors, and I wish I could remember his name. And this is one of my great side effects of getting shot, is my memory just has gone to kaputs. So, but he came up with different color codes for different conditions. Like you and I sitting here talking today, we're in condition white because we're low key, everything's fine. Nice resting heart rate. Well, then when you go to work, I assume you're still a fire chief. Is that right?
No, I'm retired now.
Okay. But when you used to go to work, just like I'm retired law enforcement, just like when I would go to work, we bump it up to condition yellow, where, we'd be kind of listening to the radio a little more intently. At home, you'd be listening to it, but you'd be doing other things, playing with the kids, condition white. Condition yellow, you're listening to the radio. You're kind of getting yourself prepared for any types of situations that may come up. Like when I would run around in the patrol car, obviously I'd be in condition yellow. I'd be looking at people. I would be surveying my surroundings, just making sure everything was good to go. And then you go on up into I think there's 2 or 3 more different color conditions that you can go into. One of them is red and then one is black. There is white, green. That's what it is: white, green, yellow, red, and black. But when you hit that condition black, you're pretty much, that's kind of, I would say I was pretty close to condition black, meaning my vision was it was tunneled and it was almost gone. Even though I still have my hearing, I don't know about my dexterity. Probably did not have very much dexterity left. When you start hitting that condition black, you lose control of bodily functions. You pretty much have freaked out so much. It's what we like to use when we do make entries into houses. They use the flashbangs to just overload the mind and overload the senses. You go into condition black and you freeze because you don't know what you're doing, because the mind is just trying to take in so much what's going on. at that point, I've almost lost my train of thought of where we were going to in the very beginning of this.
Well, we were talking about the combat breathing, and you talked about getting to condition black. We're heading toward the discussion of combat breathing.
Where the combat breathing comes into place is honestly, I don't think I was breathing at the time of the shooting the way I should have been. Combat breathing is simply being able to slowly control those breaths when you're breathing. You can do that any number of ways. One of the biggest ways, and again, Grossman points out the way he likes to show everybody, or the way the Army teaches people to do it, I suppose, is you breathe in and you count to 4. So you're breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold for 4 and you let it out for 4. And what that does is and you continuously do this. Now, obviously, in my situation, that was a little bit, it was modified to an extent because half of my nose was gone at that point. It was a dead center shot on the right side of my face, so it hit that and it broke my jaw in 3 places. So my breathing was, it was controlled, but it was kind of modified just because I could not do like in through the mouth and then out through the nose. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, obviously that calms everything down. It brings that blood pressure down. It brings you out of your conditions. It'll bring you down from black to red to yellow. And when that happens, the blood starts going through all the places in the body it's supposed to. Instead of, pulling it into your organs for combat, it lets it get back out to your fingers. So you have that dexterity. Lets it get to your feet so you can run. But as soon as I got shot and I ran back behind that car, that was the first thing I remember. I would imagine I was doing it a little before that, but I could remember the breathing. It was slow and deliberate, in the mouth, out the mouth, in the mouth, out the mouth. And I was able to slow everything down enough that, like I said before, I was able to actually unclasp my rifle, which was on a single point sling, with a single clasp. One of the guys came up and was jerking on it, trying to pull it off of me. And I told him, I put my hand up, I said, hold on, and did that clasp with my finger, which was big for me because I realized, I was like, hey, I've got dexterity. That's great. I'm coming back down. That's good.
What lessons did you learn from this experience?
Oh my goodness. We could talk about that for hours and hours.
I don't have hours and hours. Give me 10 minutes worth of lessons.
I gotcha. I will say, for me, and one of the things that I like to talk to recruits and talk to seasoned officers, and as well as I've actually started talking to all public safety, so your fire, EMS folks, is your mindset. The body is going to do what it's trained to do when it comes down to it. Your mind is going to turn off. Your body's just going to do it. I didn't think about pulling the trigger. It just happened. If your mind is not ready for the consequences of that, if you do not prepare yourself for what you are about to do or what you have to do, because if you think about it and you're not ready to do that, it could cost you your life. But if you do it and you're not ready, if you're not ready to accept the fact that you may have to take somebody's life, or you will definitely have to hurt somebody in order to go home at night, you've got some soul searching to do, because it's very real. In this day and age, I mean, we see it all the time. More and more violence. It's only a matter of time before that violence starts going at your other public safety people. It's already gone that way in a certain sense. We've already had firefighters ambushed. We've already had EMS folks fought with in the back of their rigs. That is probably one of the biggest things, is get your mind ready. Read those books. Read Grossman. And get out there and understand the nature of the business that you're in. And also to carry that mindset with you after that critical incident is done, because that's when the fun really begins, when you're dealing with your critical incident stress and your acute or your long-term post-traumatic stress. that the mindset that you have, if you understand what is coming, it is much easier to deal with it. You may not be able to stop it, but you know what is happening and why it's happening to you.
So had you previously been trained on how to deal with critical incident stress and post-traumatic stress, or is this something that you had to get on the fast track of learning because it was happening to you?
Actually, it was. I was fortunate enough. My partner Jeff, that I spoke about earlier, we had actually started reading about post-traumatic stress and critical incident stress the year prior, because there were so many. I think it was 2011. There was like 12 United States Marshals that got shot, and that was just unheard of. And there were guys just like me on a task force. There were some guys that were brand new to the Marshal Service who were out on their first warrant service, and they didn't know any better than they'd come up to the door and they got blasted through the door. So it's these guys were great people, and they were people that a lot of other law enforcement officers knew, and they were getting killed to the tune of one a month. And when we started seeing that, that's when we were like, this is very, very, very real at this point, especially when you start seeing the task force people get shot. So we were actually fortunate enough. We would always, Jeff and I have been friends for, 15, 16 years now. So, he would come over to the house, we'd have dinner, we'd sit down, we'd talk about it. And, we'd start reading these articles, start looking at different things to understand the effects of what was going to happen after a critical incident. So we kind of jumped ahead of it a little bit. I would have liked to have been prepared. Of course, everybody wants to be prepared more. I would have liked to have been prepared more for it, but I definitely was glad to know, hey, this is what a panic attack is. And, because when I felt it, it scared me, but I knew what it was. I couldn't stop it, but at least I understood it was a normal reaction to what the body had just gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what were your injuries?
The ones in the legs were through and through. They were all muscle. I got very lucky. All muscle, no bone, no nerves, no nothing. I was walking probably within 3 days at the hospital. I was actually getting up and walking around. And that was one of those things I told him. I was like, I need to get up on my feet because I did not want to lay in that bed. The shot to the face was pretty much a straight-on shot. The right nostril is gone. There's a portion of that face now that is numb, that they don't expect the feeling to ever come back in. The jaw was broken in 3 different places, shattered 2 teeth, the 2 molars all the way in the back, the upper and lower one. And they pretty much saying that what stopped everything from going through and actually continuing on through was the wisdom teeth, because I didn't have my wisdom teeth out on that side. So there's still shrapnel in my face. And as I've learned through talking with other guys who've gotten shot, as well as medical people, they're learning now apparently that you don't take that stuff out. You let the body, the small fragments, you can just let them encapsulate, and the body will take care of it itself. Mm-hmm. So I've got a lot of that still in there. Pretty much the entire round is still floating around in there somewhere. There was a little bit of nerve damage to the eye. It's pretty much come back. It's almost at 100% now. But other than that, from considering they thought I was going to have that kind of like a Bell's palsy kind of thing going on, I feel pretty fortunate to be where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's we're 45 minutes into our interview, which it just has gone. You talk about time distortion, just like a blink of an eye. It seems like we just started this. Share 3 lessons that you would want others who are listening to the radio show to learn from you without having to go through what you've went through, don't go through what I've gone through. Take these 3 lessons away and learn through me.
The first thing I would probably tell everybody, and it is since I've been going through what I've gone through, a lot of people have taken it to heart, at least locally here. Never be afraid to update your training. Never be, it's like I said before, tactics is like a game of chess. You've always you make one move, there's 2 more moves to make. We learned very quickly that a containment perimeter of guys on each corner is not a good idea. Put your L perimeter out there. Get people where they can get in a position of where they can engage somebody without having to worry about crossfires or 2 or 3 people getting in the line of fire. That would be the first thing, is obviously update that training constantly. And you can't, these guys, as you know as well as I do, fire department, EMS, police departments, you can't wait for your departments to bring the best and the brightest in training. You have to go out and seek that yourself. Never be afraid to learn on your own time. If you got 5 minutes to sit down and check Facebook, you got time to read an article on Police One, or you've got time to go read an article through whatever publications are out there for your fire guys and EMS guys. There's always time to learn, and it doesn't take a lot to plant that seed in your mind to be able to understand things, because you'll be happy when you did that, especially if it's you that gets hurt, but if it's your friend, I mean, that's just a whole nother dynamic that I couldn't even speak to. And then lastly is, like I said, just you've got to get your mind right in what you're going to do. Whether it be EMS, I've talked with several EMS guys that, dealing with small children and injuries and death, that is very traumatic. You have got to understand what you are putting your body and your mind in a position to do. If you don't do that, it could be troubling down the road for you.
Mm-hmm. Powerful lessons. Steven, thank you so much for the gift of your time to be on the show today and share your truly close call that you survived from. And I'm glad you're here to be on the show. I suspect that there is some residual from this that will endure for forever in your life, and I commend you for putting yourself out there and sharing these lessons with others so that they might live or be in a better position to survive when they're in a bad spot, because you were willing to share your story. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the time. And the last thing I'd say is, hey, it's a new normal. I'll never be back, as with many guys, never be back the same way it was before, but get your mind right and you can make it a new normal for yourself and for your family.
Well, that's it. Episode 19 is complete. Thank you to Investigator Steven Hough for sharing your powerful close call survivor story and the many situational awareness tie-in lessons that you shared. And thank you, the listener, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I sincerely appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. If you like the show, please go to iTunes and search for SA Matters Radio and subscribe to the podcast and leave your feedback and a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. You can also sign up for the free SA Matters monthly newsletter by visiting samatters.com and clicking on the red box on the right side of the homepage. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.